So somebody said that I've said to them in the past that they confuse beingness with the feeling of beingness. I don't really understand this distinction. I don't think I exactly said you confuse it with the feeling of beingness. It's that um, uh, you're still relating it to a story that's moving in time, this beingness, and you're still seeing it as your beingness in a way. Like you feel like you can see it. So beingness is this aliveness, this awakeness, this sense of being, and also this knowing of everything simultaneously. I just decided to combine the two. And so a knowing of everything. And on one side, on the beingness side, it's total love, and on the kind of like awake side, it's like total stillness and emptiness. So on one side it's love, which is everything, and then one side it's no thing, so stillness, fullness, movement or stillness, silence or sound. And I can tell that your mind keeps associating it with some form, whether it be a feeling, an idea. Like you think that in some way beingness can know intellectually. And I know you think you don't, but I can tell from the way that you say things that you like that you feel that there's something that the intellectual mind knows. So you get confused by the intellectual mind and what the mind knows. So you might think that beingness has a perspective, but it has no perspective. So it can't think this is great. It just is total love. It can't think, oh, this person is doing something wrong, because it is total emptiness and fullness simultaneously. It doesn't have a perspective. It's silent. The body has a perspective. The brain has a perspective, and that's not wrong. The thoughts have a perspective, and that carries on after waking up and after liberation. But what collapses is the identification with the body. That's who you are. The body is just an appearance, appearing in this. It's an experience which will rot like everything else and change into something new. But beingness never ever changes. It's this stillness which is awake and alive, radically alive, and the alive part is absolute love, this innocence. As soon as it manifests, so Khaleesi is total and utter love. And it's not a feeling, but it's love. I can't describe it. The most innate sense of being that's always been there. The first thing that comes in is love, and then all forms come. Sorry for repeating, but my question went up too fast. Could there be liberation without realizing, seeing unconditional love? Could there be liberation? Huh? No, no. A lot of people now that I've noticed in the West just have the intellectual awakening of no-thingness, of the awakeness, of consciousness. But it doesn't, the consciousness is still behind, and it's still a witness behind, and it's not pushed forward and been this energetic shift in, and this beingness. It's not pushed out into everything. And you can hear it by they wouldn't describe it as love. Um, I don't mean personal love though. They describe it as something bland, and you can just sort of tell. But they don't even know that, because until that shift happened, you wouldn't even know it existed. You are also a story, aren't you? What makes your words different to traditional teachings? In the end, they're just the same. Well, you know, what makes my words different? I don't know, that's a really silly question in a way, a really silly statement in a way. Uh, I think that with the internet and with the shift and with the fact that we're not Indian, I think there's going to be this really beautiful change of the way of speaking about non-duality, and I think it's going to become way more accessible and less religious. So I don't think it's anything to do with my words or anything to do with me, but I think there's this shift in speaking about it, which I think is really needed because there's too many people out there trying to be Indian and speak about this in the West when they're Westerners, and so it's got to adapt to Western culture, and soon it won't even be Indian anymore, it'll be the West waking up, which is so beautiful. And it's so different, the mentalities and the bodies in the West, they're so different. So there's had to be a huge change happen in non-duality and the way it's been spoken about. The reason why I think maybe a female body wants to call it beingness more than consciousness or the witness is because there has been too much deadness and coldness in speaking about non-duality, which has been a very masculine trait, I think. And I think that this beingness and speaking about it very much with love and compassion is a more feminine way of speaking about it. And I think it's a really needed change, a really needed change. So I just want to make it clear that in no way am I speaking about a deadness. And the effect that this has in the body-mind mechanism is one of total compassion, because you are no longer a body-mind mechanism that is trying to get things from people. So you're no longer trying to, you're not a getter, you're not a taker. In a way you could say the body-mind mechanism is total giving, and that's how the rest of nature and the rest of the world is. But when there's identification, then it's about getting. So the tree is in a perpetual state of giving, you could say. Like it's always giving, it grows and it gives. When you lose that identification, then yes, the body moves towards pleasure, like the tree moves towards the sun, which is really beautiful and not a bad thing. We have it that moving towards pleasure and moving away from pain is a really bad thing. It's beautiful, it's the way this works. We don't say that it's bad that the tree grows towards the sun. It's a really divine thing. And so you lose that intensity, that anything in this world will bring you happiness. This is happiness, this is love, what's happening. So everything which is happening is totally and utterly appreciated for what it is. And there's no longer this separation from it, so it's yourself. So in a way there's total compassion. But this compassion isn't something I teach like the Buddhists, and in the past it's been taught, you have to behave like this, but there will be a natural compassion that arises. You have to behave like this, you have to do this, you have to be this. Morality and compassion will naturally come when there's not identification. It's a natural thing. It's so beautiful. Like the tree is not going to take too much from the soil, otherwise it will die. Whereas if we look at what separate humans do, what our society is doing, is we're freaking killing the planet out of greed. We are being so freaking greedy. And us ones at the tops, I mean, don't get me started on society. And I mean, all of us that are listening, there's very few of us that are poor in our world. I mean, you might be poor relative to your society, but it's us that should be standing up for all those people that are starving and don't have homes. But we don't, because we've got it good enough, so we don't do that. It's very sad. But that won't happen. That cannot happen when a society won't behave like that, when the people in the society are not separate. Non-duality is the biggest activism this world can see. When I was younger, I went to the Middle East and I thought I could change the world. And then I began to realize that what has to be changed is people and the way they think. Because you can change the world, you can try and enforce rules, but when people are separate, they'll be run by greed. So what has to happen first is there has to be a shift in human consciousness. Otherwise, any political system that you put in will fail. It will become about greed. And people will naturally want to share. And they won't need to take so much. They won't need to wreck this planet. They won't need to go out all the time hunting to have fun because they're afraid of boredom or not being part of it. The biggest activism you can do is share non-duality. DJ, are you still considering the respite center for flip-floppers, Lisa? I love that idea, but the means and the funds haven't come yet. What do you do when you feel constant tension in the head and face day in, day out? I try and sit with it and put my attention on it, but nothing happens. But stop focusing on trying to get rid of it. Just sit there and give it tension. It's welcome as long as it wants to stay. And the reason that it's welcome is because that's an appearance of God. That's what God is creating. That's what life is creating. And then the you is, how long will it stay? So just rest the attention on it openly. You can also imagine the energy going up and out of the head. Lisa, are there charities that you support? Come on, what charities do you reckon I would support? Begins with woof woof. You don't even need to ask. I'm a massive supporter of dogs. So I support dogs charities. In the UK, not outside of the UK. I sometimes give to the Thai place where I rescued Khaleesi from. Yeah, dog ones, yes. I didn't even need to reply. Yeah, Keith. I mean, it's really beautiful to change things. I mean, I'm now 36 years old, and I started doing political activism when I was 18. And it's really beautiful, the attempt. But where I really realised it was when I worked in the West Bank in Israel, and it was this little girl got shot in the neck and killed, and her family went and blew themselves up, or two of her cousins went and blew themselves up and killed two Israeli soldiers, and that night they were all celebrating in the street, and they were upset that I didn't want to celebrate, and it just really made me cry. I wasn't angry with them because it's so awful what the Israeli army did to this Palestinian family. I understood that mentality and where it came from and the hatred they felt for years and years of oppression, but I realised that they hated. So even if we liberated them as a group, which wasn't going to happen, but even if we did, they would do the same eventually. They hated the Israelis. It was so sad. That really, 6 months after that, I experienced a big period of depression. It was so painful, that realization that that unless you change human mentality, then there's never going to be peace. ever. I mean, we've managed to achieve a relative peace in our societies, but it makes me so sad what we do to the animals and what we do to third world countries. Even in France here, it's a really beautiful town where I live. And it's a really wealthy town, but barely any of the workers are French because the minimum wage isn't enough. So it all goes to Polish people, Romanian people. So they come here and to them it's a good wage. It makes me so sad that minimum wage isn't enough for people to live off. And then you have people that are so rich in our societies. I mean, it's just really a whole mentality has to change. Because the rich people aren't going to fight for the workers. Even the middle class aren't going to fight for the workers. Cheap labour. It's the only way. It really is. If you want to become a political activist, support non-duality. It has to be the mind changes first. And you can do relative things like buy organic meat, buy free-range meat, buy from local suppliers the meat, rather than big factory farms. You can do all those sorts of things, but really, mentality has to change, or this is hopeless. Greed rules.